The suggestion that the president was aware of this story, he may have seen it in advance, that he had a profound interest in its advancement. What is your response?
Not true. You have to understand, Rod Wheeler is dead broke. Rod Wheeler, and I can send these text messages, Chris, and you can send them out to everybody, had been asking me to get him a job or help find a way to get him into the Trump administration, not the administration, but a job there. And I probably have 5 text messages from Rod saying that, okay? And the part that I heard a second ago I think is really important. The voicemail that I left for him about the full attention of the White House, that had to do with Joey Della Camera, the D.C. detective. And the D.C. detective wanted to come out and talk because he has a lot of information. And Rod had
Why would a DC detective equal the White House in your voicemail?
Oh, that's what I'm trying to explain to you.
But I'm saying, help us understand that part. How does a D.C. detective get coded as White House? What does he have to do with the White House?
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. So
right,
let me finish my sentence, okay?
Yeah.
He wanted whistleblower status, according to Rod Wheeler, because he had a lot of stuff to explain and expose, and Rod Wheeler had been talking to him. Matter of fact, Rod Wheeler's notes with Joey Della Camera is on a website called debunkingrodwheelersclaims.com, and it's all listed there, Rod Wheeler's notes. So Rod Wheeler was trying to help him because he was in a lot of trouble for talking to Rod Wheeler to get whistleblower status.
But what does that have to do with saying that the White House is interested? Why wouldn't you say Della Camera or the D.C. guy? Why'd you say White House?
Well, what I said was Rod Wheeler had asked me to see what we could do to see if I could help this guy, and I just simply made some calls. I never talked to anybody at the White House. By the way, I've never talked to President Trump in my life. And President Trump nor the White House has anything to do with any of this.
All right.
And as you go back and dissect this, as you ask me questions, I'm just going to give you the honest answer. But all of this stuff is like little innuendos, and that's why I'm happy to be here to answer these.
Well, the problem is
please go ahead.
The problem is they're your words, Ed. I mean, you know, the text message, not to add any more pressure, but the president just read the article. He wants the article out immediately. It's now all up to you, but don't feel the pressure.
And you know what? That was Rod. See, you have to understand, again, when you take things out of context, and you know how that works sometimes. Rod Wheeler had been asking me for a long time and said, Ed, when I get this case settled, the president's going to hire me. And he was always doing this and saying this to me. So this was tongue-in-cheek, talking, just texting, wasn't serious, because Rod Wheeler was always looking for a job because he has no money. And by the way, this lawsuit is all about Rod Wheeler trying to get money because he messed up. And we'll explain that later.
But Ed, help me understand this. When you say the White House in the voicemail, you say you meant this D.C. cop. When you say the president just read the article, that was a joke that's funny how? Where's the punchline in that joke?
Well, look, Chris, it wasn't a joke that was funny how. Rod Wheeler had been, talking to me all the time about how much he wanted to get a job. He said, get me on the Trump team. Please get me with Sessions. You've written text messages. Nowadays, I'm not going to write any text messages, but it was just 2 guys, me, basically finding a way to just kind of chat with him about stuff he's been talking to me about. And the other one with Della Camera, let me finish, Chris.
Please.
The one with Della Camera, not a joke at all. Joey Della Camera has a lot of information, and he wanted to come forward, and I told Rod, I'll see what I can do to find out about whistleblower status. And everybody should go talk to Joey Della Camera and ask him questions.
Well, but we have to ask you questions also because
I'm answering them.
The way
now, you might not like my answer, but I'm answering
it's not about
them.
Like or dislike. It's about testing them. That's what we do here, right?
Test them.
So
go for it.
The idea of what you said in the voicemail as code for something that's completely different, is a curious situation, as is the text, as is you being on tape talking to Wheeler, acknowledging that you knew that Wheeler had been quoted in ways that were inaccurate. How do you explain that?
That's not true either. So, Chris, let me explain that one.
Okay.
Rod Wheeler called me up and said, Ed, Malia Zimmerman misquoted me. And I said, Rod, I don't understand because there's emails back and forth that you not only approve the quotes, but you added to it. And matter of fact, at that website that I mentioned, rodwheelersclaims.com or debunkingrodwheelersclaims.com, you hear his voice saying the exact quotes he said he didn't say. What Rod Wheeler did is he called me up, and obviously this was all concocted by Rod Wheeler, because what he called me up, he said, Ed, Malia said that I said eyes on the emails. And I said, Rod, you never said eyes on the emails. I know that. You know that. If you set eyes on the on the emails, you would have told me. You never told me. So if Malia Zimmerman, who's a wonderful reporter, if she misquoted you, then you know what? Then that needs to be taken back. I said, Rod, show me where that quote exists. And by the way, Chris, I'll ask anybody, show me where the quote exists where it says Rod Wheeler set eyes on the emails. I've never seen it, and that's what I was responding to.
So when you were saying you're going to win an award for those things that you didn't say, what did you mean?
We were laughing because basically I said how crazy this world is because, Rod, you're telling me that you said that that Malia Zimmerman wrote that you said exactly what I just said a second ago, that you set eyes on it. I said, Rod, you know that didn't happen. I didn't happen. We were laughing about what a crazy world this is because somehow, you're going to win an award for having said something you didn't say.
All right, well, the good news is there's this great device in litigation called discovery. And hopefully all of this will come out because we've only seen the substantiation of his part. We're taking you at your word right now. We'll have to see if there's any backup. Let me ask you if this existed.
I'll send you any backup. Chris, by the way, I'll send you anything
you should send
you want
all.
anytime.
You should send all of the proof of everything that you're suggesting right now. And I can't believe it's not out already, frankly.
I'm going to come up there tomorrow and hand it to you, all right?
You're welcome. I'm easy to find. Ed, let me ask you something about this. Did this happen? Did the Sean Spicer meeting happen? Or is Wheeler making that up?
Yeah, great question. So I've known Sean. I was a surrogate for the RNC, and not really used that often, by the way. But I was a surrogate. I got to know Sean a little bit, and there's a recording of a man named Cy Hirsch that you need to see and
Seymour
need to
Hirsch.
listen to. Excuse me, Seymour Hirsch. I didn't know who the man was, but after I had met the Riches and offered to pay the bill for a private investigator. And by the way, this whole idea that something was coordinated with Rod Wheeler, that's absolute nonsense. I interviewed tons of different private investigators.
All right, one
and
thing
then
at a time.
somebody
The Sean
recommended-
Spicer meeting, Ed, did it happen?
All right, I'll go back to it. All right,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I have a tendency to do that.
That's all right. That's
There's
why
a
I'm
lot
here.
Of stuff here.
Did it
All right,
happen,
thanks.
the Sean Spicer meeting?
I had a meeting with Sean Spicer. I brought Rod Wheeler along.
Did
And my meeting with Sean Spicer was about, let me tell you, was about this audio recording that Cy Hirsch saying that there's a mirror copy of the hard drive of Seth Riches at the CART division at the FBI.
Right. You know that
And everyone
Hirsch
can go
says
and
that
listen
you
to
got
recording.
his. You know that Hirsch says you got his reporting wrong, right? That he says you took 2 and 2 and made 45 out of it.
Yeah, well, you know what? Cy Hirsch, maybe that's his math, but the reality is I'm not saying anything. Go listen to it and listen to his own words.
Right, but
I'm not concluding anything.
I'm just saying
I'm
when
not
the source of
anything
the
at all, Chris.
I'm just saying when the
Go
source of the
listen to it.
material says that your conclusion about it was wrong, it should be out
What's
there
my conclusion?
in the public space.
Wait. What's my conclusion?
Well, you
I don't
saw
have a conclusion.
But I know, but you saw it as something that was important enough to take it to Sean Spicer. Did he know why you wanted to meet with him?
No.
So he just took a
As
meeting?
a matter of fact, yeah, because I said, Sean, I was going to be in town. I had something I wanted to talk to you about. And Rod Wheeler was a tag along because I thought at the last minute, I said, hey, why don't you join me? Because I go to Washington often. I said, why don't you join me and kind of get to know, Sean and meet and so on. My conversation with Sean about this recording lasted about 1 minute. He said, Ed, I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it. I can't do anything. And we ended up talking about many other things, believe it or not, including, because he and I both get our shirts at the same place through some company, and we talked about the new cotton material on these shirts.
Ed,
Chris, that's the truth.
Do you think it's coincidental that there seem to be these meetings that Trump officials take that they don't know anything about, but they take the meeting anyway, and then when they get into it, they wind up changing the subject away to something else? Like when we heard from Don Jr., that he didn't know what the meeting was about, but he took it anyway because a friend asked him to, and then they start talking about adoption. He didn't understand it. This seems a little similar to that in terms of a scenario.
Well, it's not.
You know Sean, but you
Chris,
don't know him that well. You ask him for a meeting.
No.
He says he'll take it without knowing what it's about. And then you come in and you tell him about this tape, but wind up talking about shirts. Sounds a little convenient, no?
Chris, I think you're trying to twist something and make a point that's not there. So let me correct you, okay?
Please.
I called up. I have no idea about Donald Trump Jr. and this and that in these meetings. I'm going to talk directly about Sean Spicer. Sean and I know each other. We're not good friends, but we're friendly. I told him I was going to be in Washington. I wanted to come by and talk to him about something. He
And you
said,
never told
"Sure."
him what? You didn't say what it was about.
No.
Well, Were you surprised that
what?
he said he'd take a meeting as busy as he was at the time with somebody he kind of knows, but not that well?
No, I wasn't surprised. I was actually happy. So apparently he liked me more than I thought. Okay.
And then when you took the meeting and you told him about the tape, before you switched on to what shirt maker you use, what did he say?
We really
about
did,
the tape?
believe it or not.
I'm not saying you're not telling the truth. I'm just saying
Right.
that when
And
you
he
told him
said to
about the
me-
tape.
Right. I told him after he heard it, by the
Mm-hmm.
way, and Cy Hirsch can say whatever he wants. I didn't make a conclusion, Chris, like you said. I didn't make any conclusion. Go listen to it, and anybody who listens to it will say, hey, there's something here, and they should go listen to it at debunkingrodwheelersclaims.com.
You still believe that, even
and when
though
they
Fox
do, Chris,
retracted the story? Do you still believe there's something to it?
All right, you got to let me finish my point because that's one of the things I really want to be able to do, okay? So anybody who listens to it will know there's something. I didn't make a conclusion. I sat down with Sean. He and I are friendly. We see each other. I saw him at a debate once or twice. I used to do some commentating on economic matters for the RNC. And you know what? We developed a nice little friendship. The meeting lasted maybe 12, 15 minutes, and then we got the old, oh, by the way, Sean, someone's here to see you, which you know just means, Ed, get out of here.
And how did you leave
okay?
it with him?
I just left. I thought it was kind of cool. I'd never been inside the White
Did
House.
he
I've
say,
been over
let
in
me
the
know
press
what
room.
happens, I'll follow up with you about
No.
this?
No, he had no interest at all.
Were you disappointed?
No, I thought it was cool being in the White House.
But Ed, you went there to tell him something you thought was very important. You wanted him to know about this
Right.
tape when he didn't
I
show
wasn't
any interest in
disappointed.
it. You just
No,
thought
he
it was
didn't
cool
show
to
any
be
interest.
there?
He said, Ed, you know what? I'm new here. I don't know, but I can't do anything. Nobody here can do anything. You got to, whatever. And we just let it go.
He didn't tell
There
you to
wasn't
keep him aware
anything-
of anything or anything like that?
No, he had no interest. He didn't even know I was going to talk about anything. Then we ended up talking about other things, about being in here, how cool it was. We started talking, the TV was on, there was some game on. We talked about that. Rod Wheeler did not talk about asking for a job. I told Rod, come along and meet him. Maybe somehow you can schmooze and get to develop a relationship with him. At another point, Rod Wheeler sent me a text message saying, can you get me back in to see Sean? I want to give him some information. And I have a text message that I'll send to you or I'll bring to you.
All right, good.
Right.
Fox News retracted the story, as we now know.
Right.
Do you still believe there is something to the suggestion?
I don't believe there's anything in that story that isn't accurate.
You believe
The
it's
reason
all
Fox
accurate?
News let me finish. I believe Rod Wheeler's saying that he was misquoted is the reason they pulled it. Rod Wheeler wasn't misquoted. What Rod Wheeler did the night before, he had a crush or has a crush on a lady named Maria Morocco with Fox 5 Washington, and he leaked the story to her the night before. She wrote a lot of stuff, and I have a text message showing Rod saying, I need to sue Fox 5 because they misquoted me. So now Fox 5 misquoted Rod Wheeler. And then you got to bring in this lawyer named Wigdor who sues Fox for everything. He's been on your channel many times. And the combination of Rod Wheeler being broke, Rod Wheeler lying, and Wigdor putting a case together against Fox, now you have a lawsuit that you're quoting that's just full of nonsense.
Ed, why are you getting critical questioning here? Because it matters. Why does it matter? Because
course
there's a
it matters.
lawsuit, in part, because Fox News has come under the microscope for its journalism, in part, but there's a bigger reason, I think. It has nothing to do with politics, it has nothing to do with the media. You went to the Rich family. They were in grieving. They were hurting. They had the worst kind of scenario. They lost a loved one and they didn't know what happened. And you went to them with this story about what happened to their son.
No. Let me tell you something, Chris. I heard that said before, and I want to be very clear.
Right.
That did not happen.
Well, how'd you
So
get to
Let
them?
me tell you what happened. But do you want to know what happened, or you want to tell me what
I
happened?
really want to know what happened. I want to know why
right.
you would go to this
I'm gonna
family
tell you
with this type of stuff.
I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. I heard something. Someone told me something about Seth Rich. I don't know the Rich family. I
Who
heard
told
the
you
story
something?
that happened. I'm not going to tell you.
Why?
That's not something I'm going to share with you.
Why?
Because I'm not
I
bringing
thought
that.
you said you'd tell me
I'm not
everything.
going-
I thought you wanted to be all open. You were going to come up here and
All
hand
right, how
it to
about
me.
this? I'm going to tell you everything except that. How's
Why?
that?
It matters because it was so important.
No, it
Whoever
doesn't.
told you
No, it
this,
doesn't.
that you would go to a grieving family and
Chris,
talk to them
are
about the
you
thing
trying-
that would hurt them the most.
Right.
So I think we should know who
Chris.
told you because they must have been damn
Right.
credible.
Right, Chris. Before I came on air, I had a discussion with your producer to let me talk. So let me talk.
You've been talking plenty, Ed. I'm just saying I got to check
Well,
you
you're
where I can.
interrupting me, and you
because these
continue
matter.
to craft up. Excuse me, Chris. You continue to try to point something out that you think is important and not let me talk. I went to the Rich family after finding them. I got introduced to them. I spoke to them December 17th at 3:17 p.m. for 30 minutes. I started off saying, thank you, I'm sorry what happened, and so on. I heard something I wanted to share with you. And when I told them, I'll tell you exactly what it was. I heard something about WikiLeaks. They said to me, you know what? We don't believe you. I said, fine. We started talking about many other things. Started talking about children and life and so on. They said, if you ever find out anything, will you please let us know? That's all. You know what? This was very private, and I had a private discussion with them. When I left, or excuse me, when we hung up the phone, I just let it go. And then at some point, someone introduced me to Cy Hirsch. Cy Hirsch then told me all of this information. I sent that privately to the Rich family. They said, you know what, Ed, if you ever have anything concrete, let us know. And then I said to them this. I said, why don't you hire a private detective? And they said, we would love to. We can't afford one. And you know what, Chris? You don't know me, but a lot of people out there do. And you know what I said? I said, I'll pay for it. Now, I'm not a rich guy. I'm not some rich donor. I don't know why you guys keep saying that, okay, because I'm not rich at all. But I said to these people, you know what? I'd be happy to pay for it. I thought, as most people would say, no, thank you. We don't know you. They said yes. And I said, oh, I had no idea how much a private detective cost. I started asking people, who knows anybody who's a private detective? I got recommended Rod Wheeler by somebody. I have an email exchange that I'll share with you. And they said, why don't you meet Rod Wheeler? The first time I ever talked to Rod Wheeler was February 23rd. So this nonsense that Rod Wheeler said that he had been pinpointed is all BS. Rod Wheeler wasn't pinpointed. Rod Wheeler spoke to the Riches for 2 weeks back and forth with a contract. And the whole contract negotiation, Chris, according to Rod Wheeler, was Aaron Rich and Aaron Rich's wife saying, don't ever look into WikiLeaks. Don't ever talk about emails. And if you listen, and if you go to debunkingrodwheelersclaims.com, there's a 27-minute audio there of Rod Wheeler stating all of this. So Rod Wheeler then is now involved. There wasn't any of this nonsense that he's talking about, coordination, trying to do bad things to him. He knows all of that. Rod Wheeler is broke, and he's trying to make some money out of extorting maybe me, maybe Fox, who knows? But the facts are, none of this stuff is adding up to what Rod Wheeler is claiming.
Is that your full answer?
Yeah, but thank you for letting me talk.
All right. So let me ask you some questions.
Go ahead.
You're
Sure,
a Trump
please go
supporter,
ahead.
yes?
I'm a Republican, and I didn't donate any money to Trump.
You're a Trump supporter, yes?
Well, I don't want him to get mad, but I'm a Republican. I didn't give him any money, and I didn't campaign for him, so I don't know what a Trump supporter would be, but did I vote for him? Absolutely.
So you voted for Donald Trump. So
Yep.
we established that. You go to the Rich family, whom you didn't know. You didn't have any pre-existing relationship, right?
None whatsoever.
You hear something from somebody who you won't reveal the source to be, right?
Yeah, but yes.
Okay, well, here's why it matters. Because on the strength of whoever that person was and what they told you, which you have admitted on this show was not that much that you actually knew what happened, because you learned more after the Riches when you met Seymour Hersh and then did whatever other investigating that you did. So, on the basis of this one piece of information from this one person whom you won't reveal, you go to a family that is in the worst situation of their life and say to them, hey, I have an idea of what may have happened with your son. Does that make
Right.
sense to you? Is that the kind of thing that somebody
Absolutely.
does?
No, don't.
They go
but
to
Chris,
a family
don't-
that's grieving.
Chris,
Excuse me, let me finish. I let you finish.
You know, Chris, I
They
don't appreciate
You
what
go
you're
to the
saying,
family
because
that's
you're trying to
grieving and
characterize
say,
me
I
as an
heard something. You don't know anything, but you heard something.
Right.
And on the strength of that alone and your humanity, you went to this family and offered it up to them. And that was your only motivation to give them this piece of information.
So, Chris, I resent you trying to characterize me as an insensitive jerk. Because, Chris,
Those are your words.
I'm
asking you a question.
Yeah, I know, but you know what? That's what it's obviously coming across. So here's the answer, Chris. I went to this family because I thought I had heard something that would help these people because they had said in newspapers. And by the way, when I heard that information, it took me about 2 months after my son went to college, and I couldn't imagine what it would be like to have a son murdered. And nobody was telling them. The Washington police, according to what I read, wasn't telling them anything, and they weren't investigating anything. So when I got a hold of them, I went to them thinking I was actually going to try to help these people bring some relief or some knowledge about what happened to their son. My son had just left to go to Vanderbilt. I was an empty nester. Had a lot of time to reflect on my life. And you do that when you're an empty nester, Chris, okay? And I'm reflecting. And I thought, this is weird, because if I know something, and this is the way I am, about somebody's kid, or if I think I know something, and this is how I was growing up, with my kids, I'm not going to hold on to something without the parents knowing. And anybody who knows me knows that's the way I am. So what I did is I called up, got a hold of them, and shared this with them. As soon as they said, we don't believe you, it was over.
Well,
I just thought I needed to say something.
Except that it wasn't. You went and found Wheeler, you went and talked to Hirsch, and then they wound up still dealing with the family.
You're wrong there.
Well, that's what you just said.
It was over at that time,
All right,
Chris.
I understand.
Again,
I understand the distinction.
You're trying to
it
make
wasn't
me
over,
look.
but that was over. The whole situation
over.
wasn't over, but that introduction was. I understand it.
Right.
I get it.
What you don't know is they asked me to make a donation to the son's memorial. They asked me to come up for a concert in his name. They asked me to find out who this Jack Berkman guy was.
Right.
The Riches asked me. I have a text message or an email. They also said that this guy, Brad Bauman, just showed up one day and said he was assigned to them from the DNC. And they asked me why.
Okay.
Now, let's remember something. I'm a Republican. Seth Rich is a huge Bernie Sanders supporter. The Riches are big Democrats. I don't care what somebody's political party is. I care about human beings, and I heard something, and I felt inside that I needed to share this with a family. I didn't go there to upset this family. I went there to help them. They were already upset because the D.C. police wasn't telling them anything.
Well,
they were upset because their son was killed, Chris.
Absolutely
And
understandable.
I heard something, so I thought I'd share it with them.
That much we know
And
to be true.
Right.
And we know
So,
something
Chris-
else also. The Rich family put out a statement saying they hope that this lawsuit will end the connection of their son and their family to an ugly set of conspiracies. I'm out of time for this, but Ed, I hope you feel you got the full
I got so much more
opportunity.
to say, Chris.
Yeah,
I want to tell you more.
This was a good start, and I'm looking forward to you giving me all the backing for everything that you said.
Right.
The support
And have me
material,
back.
greatly appreciated. Let's look at the information.
I want to come back.